So, Josh, thank you so much for coming on today. For those of you who don't know Josh, Josh is a 22-year-old or 21-year-old. Is it 22 or
22.
21?
hmm
22-year-old property investor who's got multiple rent to SAs, is full-time in property and has been doing this for just over a year now. So, Josh, obviously, thank you very much for coming on. I want to know, for you, where did this all start? If you go back right to the beginning of like young Joshua in school, etc., where do you think things that you look back on would actually have shaped you into what you were today?
Well, that's a very good question. I think starting like right from the beginning, like when I was a kid, I was always that person selling like cokes and crisps and stuff like that in school.
Hmm.
I've always had that kind of drive to kind of be entrepreneurial and like kind of try different things. And I suppose kind of over time, like I've tried like a lot of different things and not really had much success with them. I've tried like trading and drop shipping
Hmm.
and all these things we all try, right? But I suppose I found out about property when I was actually in college in lockdown, and I found one of Samuel's videos, and it said like, "This is my latest BRR project," and like these are the figures on it, and I thought like this can't be real. Like it mustn't be real that you can buy a property and then do it up and pull your money out because we've absolutely kind of programmed from the get go to kind of get a job, get a mortgage, get a dog, you know. So it kind of blew my mind a little bit. It's kind of and
Okay.
it kind of made me think like that this is definitely something that might work for me. Um, so I kind of looked into it for a while, and I suppose kind of during when I was in college, and I kind of had a go at kind of deal sourcing. I did some of the free kind of training, and I I kind of dabbled in it a little bit, but I wasn't really kind of committed. But um, I suppose I dropped it for a while, and I kind of after that I kind of did like an apprenticeship in tax, like after college, and I was really discontent because at the time I suppose I knew about property and I knew that there was like a different way to do things, but I'd kind of tricked myself into thinking like, oh, like you know, I have to stick to this path that has been laid out. But I suppose over time I did that for a while, and um, I became a truck driver as well. I did that for a while, and then it got to a point where I really thought, you know what, I can do better than this. I can, I'm young. I can make it happen. So, like, if like, the worst case is like it fails, and I can kind of go back and get another kind of job. You know.
So, touching on that point for you, what was, the first idea that failed? You said you tried drop shipping and different things. What for you was like your first, let's say, entrepreneurial venture that you actually failed at?
I suppose like trading. I did when I was like, oh, I was really young. I was like 13, 14. And I did that. And I suppose with that kind of thing, it's like um, it's kind of key to be like consistent with it. And like I kind of wasn't. Um, and yeah, so that didn't work out. But yeah, like I think property is definitely something that is kind of really something that I really like, and is something that I definitely want to grow into more. Um, so I suppose at the moment I've got six rent to rents, and most of those are no money down. So I've worked with joint venture partners. So I really was intentional about not having any excuses. Where a lot of people get into this game and they have like a lot of excuses. They might say, "Oh, I've got no money," or um, the X Y Z's too risky, which is an important thing to think about. But at the same time, like sometimes you just need to go for it. Um, and yeah, it depends what you want as well, I suppose, as a person. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what would you say before you even started seeing any form of success in property? Um, you mentioned you failed in trading, you weren't committed. What do you think are the key factors in failure that you have to learn before you understand the key factors of success?
That's a really good question. I think fa- like you, you never really fail unless you actually give up. It's like a plane, right? If you're on a plane, and the reason the plane stays in the air is because it keeps moving forward. So if you like stop, then you're gonna fall out of the sky and you're gonna crash and you're
Mm.
gonna fail. But as long as you keep moving and you just do the steps like every day, you can't fail. So that's something um, that you really need to like learn, I think, and I think it's something we all learn, but um, it's also having this kind of like almost arrogant like self belief in yourself to like trust in the process when it might like seem like almost impossible like at the start. Just like having this like absolute committed 100% self belief that you kind of develop if you kind of fail first, because you realize that you have to like go through like the hurdles to like get to the success, and like it's never going to be kind of overnight, so you need to, yeah, just be consistent, I suppose.
And did you have that arrogance and that self belief when you first started in property? Or do you think you've built that over time?
I suppose so. I suppose everyone when they start are very like is very kind of, they kind of have this uninformed optimism where you start and you know a little bit, so you are quite arrogant in a way because you don't understand how hard it can be. So you start at this level where it's like an uninformed optimism, and then as you start doing it, you kind of, I suppose you kind of realize how like hard a business it can be. So your kind of um, I suppose your kind of optimism, it kind of goes down as you kind of figure out kind of the challenges in the business. But as you learn more, you kind of um, um, that kind of levels out, and you kind of become a lot more like optimistic. You have um, this informed optimism where you kind of understand the hurdles, and you kind of mentally kind of understand it and you're okay with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
yeah,
I think I understand what you're saying. At the beginning, you're an uninformed optimist, so you kind of want to, you believe everything's possible, you kind of believe the sky's the limit. And as you kind of go through the trenches of building your business, you almost become like an informed pessimist or an informed optimist. Either you kind of realize how hard it is and you give up, or you say, and that's where most entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, let's say, give up, is they become informed, they realize that it's not easy and they give up. And then there's those who kind of become informed optimists and say, like, I know if I keep doing this, I will get through it and make it on that other side. And I think that's super, super important.
yeah,
So
it's absolutely key.
you mentioned then that you kind of went into all these kind of little different career paths and stuff like that. So have you ever, or have you always been someone who's always then not gone for the conventional route of, especially a lot of young people watching this might feel that they have to go to university or they have to do an apprenticeship. So how did you push against that conventional and also decide, let's say, not to go to university?
Because I suppose I kind of thought I did have to do it to start with. Um, I suppose I kind of blindly went into it, and after like a lot of struggle, I suppose you realise kind of if it's not right for you. Um, and I suppose it was really that it got to a point where like, this has to work. There's no way I can spend like 50 years like doing a job that I'm kind of maybe like 40%, 30% happy with.
Yeah.
Like there's more to life than that. So there's so many things where I suppose, yeah, people put them off as a scam, and it kind of makes you think as well, what are kind of we putting off that we don't quite understand and we don't have a grasp of, and we're putting it off because we don't understand it. So like kind of learning about property or like any business model, all it kind of, it gets the cogs in your head turning, I think, It makes you think that it kind of makes you realize that there's a whole world of possibilities. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah.
in that journey for you then, you started in the property game, you started in the property business. How, how quickly was that timeline for you to doing your first deal, getting your first rent to rent, and how did you go about securing that?
So okay, that first deal. So that it was super challenging. It took me about 4 months after I joined the academy, after I got into property, to actually get that first deal. So I think I kind of had a script, like what I was saying when I was calling agents, speaking to landlords, and that kind of thing. But I was just completely not confident at all in what I was saying, which is a lot of, which is a big factor in having success when selling on the phone is your tonality. But I didn't really think of that. So it took me ages. I would go into like Starbucks every day, sitting in Starbucks, and then just like trying to call people and kind of like overthinking. Like, should I call this person? Is it worth speaking to this person? But yeah, so it took me like 4 months, and that came through an agent in Harrogate, um, and yeah, so it came from me calling about another property which wasn't available, but they said, you know what, we that one isn't available, but we do have this other one that we're like kind of struggling to get rid of. Um, yeah, and I think a lot of deals come that way. Like, a lot of the best deals come from when not from when you like initially speak to them or from the initial kind of viewing that when you view a property. It comes from um, maybe like the other ones they might kind of recommend to you that might be off market, or they might um, they might come back to you with a better offer. But anyway, so I viewed this property, and I initially kind of wanted to sell it, but then I realised, um, like, at this point I'd quit my job, right? So I was kind of living off of savings. So I kind of thought, like, is selling this as a deal gonna solve my problem? Like, I could sell it, and if I didn't co-source it, make 3K, but that's not gonna like really solve my cash flow issue. So I actually found somebody who I could JV with. So I said to them, if you put the cash in, I'll do absolutely everything, make it completely hands off for you, and and we'll split the profits 50-50, and that's what we did. And that's gone decent, that first deal. Um, and there is a lot more to touch on when I think in terms of like JVs, because I think a lot of people do go about them the wrong way. You shouldn't be going up to people just like saying, "Hey, do you want to do a JV?" when you haven't met them before. So it's really important to just speak to as many people as possible, add value to as many people as possible, and you'll, from getting to know them and adding value to them, you'll figure out what they want in their business, in their kind of investment journey. So you've really got to kind of, if you go up to that person that wants kind of a hands-off investment where they want just a cash flow every month, then, and you just kind of say, "Well, I've got this deal. Like, what does it look good to you?" kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's how you kind of approach it. That's
So
how
that's how you approached it with your joint venture partners. You were trying to add as much value as possible before trying to sell anything to anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
very soon after you got that deal, I think we either got in touch because of that deal or afterwards, very soon after, I believe, started working together.
Yeah, I messaged you about that deal to co-source it,
Yeah,
and
I think
and
so.
you said you'd actually viewed that one already.
Yes, I'd
Yeah,
already
yeah,
viewed that flat, but it didn't end up. I think I was also trying to sell it as a deal, and it didn't end up. The investor that I had lined up for it ended up pulling out on the back end, which, does happen sometimes.
yeah,
Um, so I ended up not taking on that deal. But as we both know, full well later down the line, that same landlord who owns that building, I now have a building two doors down, and then we've got
yeah,
a whole block from that
yeah,
landlord,
exactly.
and I would have never had that contact. I never would have got that deal if I hadn't gone to that viewing on that first flat that um, never came to anything. But nearly like 9, 10 months later, we secured an entire building off that same landlord from that same viewing. So I think it, like you talked about, is it's not the ones, it's not the initial viewing or it's not the initial outreach that actually is usually what brings something, and it's the fruition. It's kind of the continuous follow up, the touching base, the building a pipeline, and then 6, 12 months down the line, suddenly that person has something for you or something comes up and it actually does work. It's very hard to necessarily just convert on deals straight away all the time.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
so going into your first service accommodation, at this point, I don't think we'd worked together yet, but obviously we were in kind of touch. And going into your first service accommodation experience, what was that like for you?
It was kind of terrifying, to be honest, because I didn't have a lot of money, and I JV'd with somebody, and I'd used their money to get this deal. So I was like super committed to like making it cash flow from the get go. And with SAs, it can take a little bit of time for it to play out and
Yes.
for it to become profitable. So I was like really nervous about making it a success. But like, I mean, I suppose it was the time of year I took it on. It was the start of June when I took that on.
Yeah.
So yeah, luckily that time of year it's pretty good for because you go into the summer months, you've got decent demand. Um, so it was kind of stressful, but I
Hmm.
think in business and a lot of things, you grow into that kind of thing. And so like to me now, the thought of just running one SA would be like a doddle because I've got six now, and I've grown into it. But back then, like even like one SA was kind of stressful, and the thought of having like half a dozen SAs would have seemed like absolutely
Horrible for you
daunting,
at the
like
time.
absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
I'm sure like for you, like when you had your first essay, like the thought of having like over 30 units would be like insane.
Oh yeah,
But
I think
you
on
do it,
my
and
first one, you're just on your first one. I think it's very normal to just kind of be shitting yourself a little bit and
yeah.
be very nervous. But what would you say then that you can kind of do to make those nerves at ease, or how did you manage that property to kind of make it profitable, make it successful, where you kind of started to calm those nerves a little bit?
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I did get like a decent booking like just after I put it online, so I think that
Yeah.
really helped. But I suppose, yeah, like but before I learned about kind of the longer term strategies, like getting longer term bookings with duplicate listings and stuff, I was a bit kind of lost on what I could do to get the longer term bookings. I suppose like I just trusted the process, and then like kind of a month, no, 2 months later, I got like a decent like relocator booking, and they were in for about 3 months. So I made like a decent amount every month from that booking. Um, so yeah, I think it's just trusting the process, because if it's something that's completely kind of new and out of kind of the bounds of the ordinary in working a job, then it's always going to be like stressful, or it's supposed to be difficult, because if it wasn't difficult and it wasn't stressful, then everybody would do it, and that's where the value lies, in like how much you can tolerate.
No, I completely agree, and I think there is many people who have made money before you, and there'll be many people who make money after you, and I think there's very much a blueprint almost of which you can follow that will help you do that. So you took on your SA, you listed it on certain sites, used a certain software, just like many before you, and then you kind of made a duplicate listing, and I believe that's where you got that inquiry from for your 3 month booking that kind of held you out and made you that profit. And
Yeah.
like again, it's just following steps of people who've done slightly more than you, who can kind of sit back and go like, yeah, I did X, Y, and Z, and following that blueprint. And it just takes time to kind of grow and scale and go further in that. And then let's say I believe it was probably around June, July time we started working together. Um, and you at the time were very much heavily into kind of deal sourcing and all that kind of stuff. Talk a little bit about that for me.
Yeah, so I think we started working together, like it was just after I took on my first essay.
Yeah.
It was 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, and yeah, I I've always been someone that's like really hated like phone calls, like so like it was outside my comfort zone, like calling agents and landlords and stuff,
Yeah.
which I suppose is why like it took me 4 months to get an essay, because I was just so like nervous calling people. So it was yeah, I definitely put myself out my comfort zone with that. And kind of in that first kind of month in July, we sold two deals together. Um, One in Bradford and one in Harrogate. Um, yeah, that one in Bradford was really interesting because I remember looking on Gumtree. I think it was
Yeah.
like Friday lunchtime, and then yeah, I messaged the guy and he was like, yeah, come down, have a look, and it's just down the road for me, like 15 minutes down the road. So I went down and I viewed it, and he's like, yeah, I understand it. Let's go ahead. Yeah, sure, let's do it. Which is kind
So,
of unusual sometimes to have someone just
yeah.
say like, let's just do it. But you do come across them sometimes.
And I
And sold
remember
it that day. Yeah.
we spent a lot of time on the phone together initially, and like, what was it that? Because obviously, I've been doing this journey slightly longer than you have, and what was it that you think like, was almost like eureka moments where we were sat down, we were talking, and I think you made a lot of development in terms of like, okay, what to say and your confidence kind of stuff. What are the kind of potential eureka moments where I've said something, or even just something that you've had on your own, where you go like, right, that's really clicked, and that helps you made the next kind of step up and level in the business.
I think when we were on those Teams calls and we were kind of practicing calling people. I think what really helped was like we were like together on the call. We were in it together, and it wasn't just like me, the 21-year-old, that were just calling like
Yeah,
these landlords. So I suppose in a way it was kind of like an imposter syndrome of like I'm just a 21-year-old
yeah,
calling these landlords and these agents to pitch them on doing company lets. So like us being on the call like helped a lot. And then I suppose after that, after getting that first deal as well, that gave me a lot of confidence. Like actually doing it yourself and getting the results and like starting to see a little bit of momentum, that gives you so much confidence.
yeah, absolutely.
So
I think it's the application to kind of go forward, and when you've really realized, like, oh, like what so and so has been saying, this is actually a real thing. Like, it actually does work when you start to put it into practice yourself. I think that's a real game changer for the confidence. And I think another thing that you touched on, which is super, super important for people, is that you need to have people around you. So, like,
yeah,
you
an
know,
interesting story. Like yeah, if you have a buddy and you're calling for rent to rent, try like do it with them. Go to Costa, go to Nando's, like order your Nando's, and then just have like a list of 10 people to call, and just bang through the list. And then by the time your feuds come, you've done the hard bit. And I
yeah,
used to do this with Dwight Faulkner.
yeah,
You know Dwight. So me and him used to sit in Costa in Manchester Piccadilly all day, and he used to like push me to call like 70 people a day.
yeah,
He used to tell me off for like calling 50 people in a day because he used to go, I know for a fact you can do 120 calls. That's how many I've done. So
but I think that's a it's so important. Like, if you surround yourself with someone who's doing 10 calls a day, you're going to do 10 calls a day. And obviously, Dwight has been successful because he just puts out a ridiculous amount of volume. Like,
yeah,
if you make more phone calls than anybody else, even if you're not even good, like, you could be really bad at what you're saying. But if you make more phone calls than everybody else, you will see that success, and you kind of are able to get onto those next steps because you just do more output. And I think it's that simple. And like, probably having Dwight in your corner and like working with people like that definitely kind of accelerated that progress.
yeah, yeah.
And in your journey then, so you've got to the point, you've now got your first SA, you've sold a couple of deals working with me, and then kind of what did you do from there to bring yourself to the next level, to go from one and like selling a deal or two deals a month to doing, now having two, three, four, and then all the way up to six.
So I suppose I kind of in having that first deal and having like sold a couple of deals, as I said, that gave me a bit of confidence, and I there was two more units in Harrogate that I found. Well, there was three actually, and I initially kind of I wanted to sell them, but there was somebody that was like super keen to like JV because he'd seen how my JV was going with the other person was going, so he were keen to work with me, so we ended up doing a JV on two of them, and I sold him um, the third unit. So I suppose that really came about because I'd like started to build a little bit of a reputation,
Yeah.
kind of in the like if you're not in the academy you won't know, but we have these inner circles, they're like kind of networking events, and everybody like goes to the same networking events every week. So I was building, I suppose, a reputation around that circle of people. So that like they wanted to work with me. I was adding value to people, so I kept adding value to people. So they were like talking about me. So it's all about like if you do those things like every day, like just adding value to people, like doing little bits every day, that builds momentum. And yeah, but that's kind of the art of building your pipeline, right? It's just like just
Yeah,
being
I think
consistent with building
nothing
it, and then
nothing helps more than a real world case study. Someone who could sit there and say like, yeah, I've worked with Josh, I've done this with him, and he's, we've achieved X together, whatever that may be. In this case, a profitable rent to rent. You can kind of sit there and talk about it, and then other people who are also looking to joint venture, also work with you, have that belief and that trust. And I think
yeah,
that's one of the things that people lack the knowledge or lack the skill of, to understand that adding value to people is super important. And also, people do business with, other people that they know, like, and trust. So it's so much like, before you even try and sell anyone anything, you should just spend time trying to get to know them, build trust with them. Because if you do a joint venture with somebody and you jump in a joint venture and it actually doesn't work out, it can be a horrible experience. And you wouldn't know that to begin with if you hadn't, if you jumped into it. But if you had spent some time actually getting to know them, seeing if you were aligned on your goals and your vision for it, it is how you kind of do successful. Like we've got 15 units that we've joint ventured on, or 14, sorry. And I plan to work with them in the future in developments and stuff like that. But we've only got one joint venture partner who we work together with very closely on things, because we spent a lot of time talking and kind of figuring things out before we even jumped in together to do the joint venture. Um,
yeah.
and how do you find it then? Obviously, I know you've got three different joint venture partners. So how do you manage that? How do you manage that and kind of make sure that everyone's happy? Obviously, if everyone's making money, generally people are happy. But how do you kind of manage all those relationships to make sure that you're doing the
Yeah,
best possible you
it's
can for
really
everyone?
interesting. It's all about you need to keep in communication with them regularly. You need to like speak to them like at least once a month. You need to, and I suppose it's setting expectations from the get go as well. Just like being really like super clear that yeah, this is like my role and responsibility. This is yours. Um, I suppose like for me, I've always like said like I'll if you want I'll pretty much do everything. But if you want to get involved with stuff to kind of learn as well, that's fine as well. So I think that kind of dynamic has worked quite well. Just saying like I'll do everything, and where you want to get involved, then that's fine. But just keeping that communication and setting expectations is probably the main thing I'd say. Definitely, yeah. Hmm.
Okay. No, I think that's very, very good advice. Where are you currently at now in your business? Like, what's your turnover? What's the kind of breakdown for figures to for some people to sit there and go, okay, they're aspiring to be at six SAs and maybe selling a deal a month. How do you know, what's the numbers behind that?
Yeah, so I suppose so. These two York ones are really interesting. So they're gonna make, so that they're turning over between. Oh well, they're still fairly new. They're gonna make £1,200 a month each, and that's gonna be from like between 4.5 to 5k a month. So that brings on to a really interesting thing, which is VAT.
Yeah.
So I kind of have various units spread across different companies with the JV partners.
Yeah.
So yeah, HMRC better not be listening to this, but um, yeah, it's kind of important to think about VAT with those kind of things as well, because you can very easily hit it, and if you've got quite tight margins, it can make you suddenly unprofitable.
Yeah.
So like the units are doing like about 3-4k turnover each. Like the York ones are a bit higher, and profit it varies. In the winter it was quite slow, But now it's going to be once the York ones are like done, it's going to be like, for me, it's going to be like 3-4k a
Yeah.
month
But
profit.
that's obviously you're taking 50%. So
That's the 50%.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That's
yeah,
after taking 50%.
yeah.
Um, and if you kind of were to look forward, what's the vision for you going forward in property? You've got this point where you're full-time in property, you've got cash flow. What's the vision forward for Josh?
I think for me, I think I'm going to be focusing at least this year and into next year on building my SA portfolio, getting more of the contractor properties more than the smaller units, because I think that, these days, you know everybody's going for the two beds in York and Leeds and those kind of things, but they can be really profitable, but the competition now is a lot higher than it used to be. So with us, you do really need to differentiate yourself. And like for you, like having the apart hotels, like that gives you a massive like competitive advantage.
Yes,
So
that's definitely true.
I either taking on those kinds of deals, or potentially just taking on the bigger contractor type properties, kind of the 4, 5, 6 bed properties. Um, yeah, the like I've found that Hull is quite a good patch. I've got an SA in Hull, which is
Mm.
doing like really well. So I'm going to expand there, I think.
And that's
Um,
one that you financed yourself.
yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
I'm going to expand there, and yeah, we'll just take it from there. I think that I think it's a mistake almost sometimes to make goals that are too far ahead, like more than 2 years away, maybe, because like you've got no idea how the goalposts are going to shift in those 2 years, and like no doubt it will. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's no way that you can like do 2 years in business and everything that happens like go exactly
It's
to
exactly
plan,
the
and
same as, yeah.
like so
So many things have changed.
yeah, I try to kind of focus on kind of the closer future.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think that's absolutely the right thing to do. So how are you going to go about securing these deals now? Like, what's the methodology? What's the Josh methods that helps people get
Um,
deals that, they're not necessarily getting at the moment?
I think for me, I'm going to like the JVs have definitely had the place in helping me secure them with no money,
Yeah.
but I think I'm going to be taking on my own units in my own name just so that it gives me a bit more flexibility and like what I can do and stuff, and I'll be just kind of free to kind of do everything how I've kind of learned and kind of how I want to do it. I can not that I don't have that freedom already, but obviously it kind of makes more sense to kind of double your profits, I suppose, and then just maybe like tie up a little bit of cash to take on those deals. So I'm maybe if it's like quite a big deal, like an apart hotel or whatever, or like a massive property, then I might like JV, because there's a lot more like meat on the bones for like both of you to like take from. Whereas if
Yeah.
it's like kind of a smaller SA that's making £1,000 a month, like it's very like small cake. So just taking on bigger deals and like taking on deals myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say.
And if there was one final thought, if you had 60 seconds to essentially summarize what you've learned in the past year and a half doing business, and you could tell that to someone starting out, what would you give them the 60 seconds and what would you say?
I'd say that you have to firstly get the knowledge. Get the knowledge first. Like speak to someone like Joost. Take massive action. Just go all in. If you're not going to go all in, like what's the point in doing it? Go big or go home. So like just put as much action as possible. Lastly, completely trust. You've got to completely trust in the process. Have massive self belief. Have an unreasonable amount of self belief. Where everybody else says that it can't work, you need to be your own biggest advocate. So that's what I'd say.
Okay. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Josh.
No problem.
And this episode will be out soon. So, yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.